In this film, it's more kind of a general statement of public and private lands that are in Segobi.
Well, it also becomes like the establisher of the way you can refer to the film later on, of course, the reference. Yeah. You can always say to somebody, I remember the shot of the desalination plant. Mm-hmm. That's how you've named it as well.
Right.
In Valley Centro, can you talk about the shot with the goat?
Well, that was one of the things I wanted to map into that film, and that was recreation that would happen, and how rural recreation is so different than what you would be finding in Los, where you see a soccer game. There's always cross-referencing from one film to the next. So, and then there's also a stock car race in El Valley Centro too, or some people working on a stock car getting ready for a race. So I wanted to make references to play, not just work in the valley. And that the woman that's doing the goat tying, which is an event for women in rodeo, is Nora Hunt, who was the high school champion of California a few years before that, and had received a full scholarship to the University of Las Vegas, which is a big rodeo school. She was away at college the first year, and a friend of mine knew that family and got me to drive up there, and they were very kind, so they set up that's what they do. They would just practice over and over and over. And most of my audiences laugh at that shot because they're not used to seeing rodeo and rodeo practice. So it's so out of context that it seems kind of ridiculous. But it's really about precision and becoming good at something. And then all of us that are so liberal, we worry about the goat, right? How awful it is for this poor goat to have to go through this over and over. And I guess I feel that way still, but I feel more for the cows in Los, because they're about an hour away from slaughter, and you can see in that shot the agitation that they have. They can smell the blood. I shot that shot, it's a shot of cattle, if you didn't see Los, that are in a pen, and they're very close, and they're kind of repositioning themselves, and one of them has a very bloody horn. And I shot it from the lunchroom, the workers' lunchroom, which had Dutch doors that you could open the top door. So they'd eat, and right outside, then that top door would be open to get fresh air, and the cows that they would be killing in the afternoon would be mulling around outside while they were eating their sandwiches. And I was allowed to shoot the shot from there. But I thought that was I thought that was a very telling shot about. So there's those kind of connections as to how we relate, what do we do with animals, how we relate to them. There's cows in every shot, in every film. There's a train in every film. There's a billboard in every film. There's a highway in every film. There's birds in every film. So there's, even though one's about wilderness, one's about a city, and one's about a rural area, there's always these connections between all three films. So if you see the whole trilogy, and I have been, I was showing it all in a row, where you'd see it in a 5-hour block, which is very demanding. But those kind of connections become very apparent in that setting. And I'm surprised actually how fast it goes when you watch all three of them, because you kind of give into the structure.
Is that really the primary reason that you were screening them as the trilogy in one epic viewing?
I just wanted to give those people in my audience that really like my work and would really give a lot to it a chance to have that experience. I didn't expect most of my audience to want to see it that way. I like to do it this way too, where it's shown every every night in a row or every week on the same night like you did. I think that's an interesting way to come back to it. And if you come to all three, I think those connections still get made. But when it's all in one setting, it's, I think, very powerful that way. But it's because it's kind of like if you walk in 8 miles to go to a hot spring, you know, it's much better than the one that you drive up to and go into. So that's the same philosophy. Yes.
What about like when, was that the same gunfire from 10 Skies?
Where was there gunfire in this
Oh,
one?
like, there's a,
I have
Like a
one.
mountain, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's the Alabama Hills, and no, that's gunfire that I actually didn't happen there. That's one place where I cheated. It happened at a shot that didn't get into the film, where I was filming along a stream and there was a shooting range nearby. And I moved that to the Alabama Hills because those hills are where all the cowboy movies were made in the 30s and 40s. So I wanted to kind of give this ghost kind of feel to the Alabama Hills.
so then
They're outside of Lone Pine. If you go to Lone Pine, you can buy a book at Lone Pine and it tells you all of the films that have been made in the hills and gives you a map, and you can go see where Tom Mix leaned against a rock. Stuff like that. Yeah.
Then what do you think about the connections, like between? I mean, because I connected it to the gunfire and 10 Skies, and then you were
Yeah,
talking
well,
about
this was
things
made
located.
before that, and then 13 Lakes comes next, and that's when I found gunfire at Crater Lake, and that was used in a very specific way because I recorded gunshots at a place that was a very spiritual place for American Indians, and now it's run by a state park, or federal park, that doesn't allow people to shoot guns, and some people nevertheless found it upon themselves to do target practice there. And I wanted to bring that into that film to allude to this kind of more than a rude behavior. And that's different than the use in this. And then in 10 Skies, I use those same gunshots again because 10 Skies uses all of the sound, uses sound from all my previous films, so it's all manufactured.
I had a question regarding the length of the shots and your choice of starting and stopping points.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with 16mm shooting techniques. I know a 50-foot roll of Super 8 is exactly 2.5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Was this a 100-foot roll of 16?
These were
or the longer rolls?
These were 100-foot rolls, which gives you 2 minutes and 47 seconds. These shots are 2.5 minutes, so I could slide the shot 17 seconds earlier or later.
Wow.
So you had to be fairly precise on the start
Yeah.
of the shot,
Well,
like the train and things like that.
Yeah, the problem with 16mm film lately is Kodak doesn't do a very good job of cutting it at the ends, so you get a lot of movement in the last 5 or 6 feet. So even though I'm using a 100-foot roll as last 5 or 6 feet, generally you have to throw away. And I think in this film there's some movement in the second last film where the camera is moving. That's due to Kodak film not being cut. Any other movements due to photochem not being able to print properly anymore. But no, I was very interested in doing one roll shots and to go back to kind of early cinema where when film was just discovered that they would do these full rolls and do portraits of things, a kiss or a train coming into a station or mount a camera onto a train and do the whole shot. So I was very aware of that. Of course, those are all silent, so I was also interested in adding sound to that. But I always had this philosophy that film somewhat was snatched away by narrative filmmaking way too quickly, and it became, once it became a narrative tool, that those kinds of experiments that were done before that were kind of dropped, and we've never really continued to see what could be done with an image. And that's when I started to decided not to do text and image films anymore and just do portrait films. I thought of myself as going back to that point in time and trying to reestablish a way of making films, of looking and listening in a much more intense way.